The lecture hall was massive, filled with students from dozens of different worlds. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like they were made of pure energy. They all sat quietly, watching the holographic display at the front of the room. Professor Kelthus stood beside the projection, his silver scales catching the light. He had 4 eyes that moved independently, and when he spoke, a small device on his chest translated his clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. Today's lecture was about dangerous predators that no longer existed. Kelthus had been teaching this class for over 200 years, and he knew everything about extinct species. He touched a control panel and a new image appeared in the air above the students. It showed a strange creature standing on 2 legs. The being had almost no fur, just some hair on its head. Its eyes pointed forward like a hunter's eyes, and its body looked weak compared to most predators. "This is a human," Kelthus announced. His voice carried across the silent room. They came from a planet called Earth, a world so dangerous that scientists call it a death world. Humans were perhaps the most terrifying predators ever recorded. But you don't need to worry about them anymore. They destroyed themselves 300 years ago in a nuclear war. Several students made sounds of relief. One insect-like being clicked its mandibles nervously just looking at the image. Kelthus continued his presentation, pointing to different parts of the hologram. He explained how humans could run for hours without stopping, chasing their prey until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. He told them how humans could eat almost anything, allowing them to live in any environment. He described their ability to work together in large groups, planning complex attacks on their enemies. But the most dangerous thing about humans, Kelthus said, his 4 eyes scanning the audience, was their minds. They formed emotional bonds with creatures that weren't even related to them. They would sacrifice themselves to save others, even strangers. This made them completely unpredictable. When fighting humans, you could never be sure what they would do next. The professor showed images of old battles between human military forces and galactic scouts. The humans had much worse technology, but they still won most fights. They used tricks and traps. They refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. They protected their wounded instead of leaving them behind like sensible species did. Fortunately, Kelthus continued, humans never achieved spaceflight technology. They developed nuclear weapons and promptly used them on each other. The entire planet became radioactive. Every scan we've done of Earth shows a dead world. No cities, no communications, nothing but radiation and ruins. A hand went up in the back of the lecture hall. The lighting was dim there, making it hard to see clearly. Kelthus nodded toward the student. "Yes, you have a question?" A young female stood up slowly. She was about average height for a human, though nobody in the room knew that yet. She had brown hair pulled back from her face and wore the standard blue jumpsuit that all university students wore. Her skin was pale and her forward-facing eyes looked directly at the professor. "I need to correct something you said." The student spoke clearly. "Humans aren't extinct. We're still alive." The entire lecture hall went completely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. Every student turned to look at the speaker. Kelthus's 4 eyes all focused on her at once, something his species only did when extremely surprised or alarmed. "My name is Kate Morrison," the young woman continued. "I'm from Earth. We didn't destroy ourselves completely. Many humans survived the war. We've been rebuilding our world for 3 centuries. The Galactic Council approved our application for student exchange program 6 months ago. I'm one of the first humans to study at an off-world university." For a moment, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. Students jumped from their seats. Several ran for the exits. One species that could teleport simply vanished with a pop of displaced air. An insect student near Kate scrambled away so fast it left scratch marks on the floor. A gelatinous blob-like creature pressed itself against the far wall, trying to get as far from Kate as possible. Kelthus held up his hands, trying to restore order. "Everyone, please calm down. Security, we need security in Lecture Hall 7 immediately." Kate remained standing, her hands visible and open at her sides. She didn't make any threatening moves. She just waited, watching as panic spread through the room. She had expected this reaction, but seeing it happen still hurt. These were supposed to be educated beings, scientists and students who valued knowledge, yet they were terrified just because of what species she belonged to. 3 security officers arrived within minutes. They were heavily armed and armored. The lead officer, a massive creature that looked like it was made of stone and metal, approached Kate carefully. His weapon wasn't pointed at her, but his hand rested on it. Miss, I'm Officer Bruthen. I need you to come with me. Don't make any sudden movements. Kate nodded slowly. I understand. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just a student. That may be, Bruthen replied, his deep voice rumbling. But right now you've caused quite a disturbance. The dean needs to speak with you. As Kate walked down the aisle toward the exit, students pressed themselves back into their seats. Some covered their eyes. Others made religious gestures for protection. One student was crying, actual tears running down its furry face. Kate felt like a monster even though she hadn't done anything wrong. Professor Kelthus followed behind the security officers. His four eyes watched Kate constantly as if he expected her to suddenly attack. But Kate just walked calmly, following the security team through the corridors of the university. Other students in the hallway saw her coming and quickly moved away. Some ducked into classrooms or side passages. News traveled fast in the university. By the time Kate reached the administration building, it seemed like everyone knew. She could see students looking out windows at her. She heard whispers and gasps. Someone screamed when they saw her through a doorway. Kate kept her expression neutral, but inside her heart was sinking. She had hoped that beings advanced enough to travel between stars would be more open-minded. She had thought that a university, a place of learning, would be welcoming. Instead, she was being treated like a dangerous animal that might attack at any moment. The dean's office was large and decorated with crystals from various worlds. Dean Zephyrus was a being made of living crystal, currently glowing with orange and red colors that Kate's orientation materials said indicated stress and concern. The dean's body refracted light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Miss Morrison, the dean said, the voice coming from somewhere inside the crystal body. We have a serious situation here. Kate sat in a chair that was designed for creatures with different body shapes than hers. It wasn't comfortable, but she tried not to show any discomfort. Dean Zephyrus stood behind a desk made of some kind of metal she didn't recognize. The dean's crystal body was still flashing orange and red, those colors that meant worry and stress. Professor Kelthus was also in the office, along with Officer Bruthen and two other university officials Kate hadn't met before. Everyone was staring at her like she was a bomb that might explode at any second. Miss Morrison, Dean Zephyrus began. According to every historical record in the Galactic database, humans were a primitive species that destroyed themselves 300 years ago. The entire galaxy believes Earth is a dead, radioactive wasteland. Now you appear in one of my lecture halls and claim this information is wrong. You must understand why this is alarming. Kate took a deep breath. She had practiced this conversation in her head many times during the long journey from Earth to this university. Dean, the historical records aren't completely wrong. The nuclear war happened exactly as recorded. Billions of humans died. Most of our cities were destroyed. The surface of our planet became dangerously radioactive. Then how are you here? Kelthus asked. His four eyes were all focused on her, studying her like she was a specimen in a laboratory. Because humans are hard to kill, Kate said simply. Some people survived in underground bunkers. Others lived in submarines under the oceans. Some survived in remote areas where the bombs didn't fall. It was horrible and we lost so much, but we didn't go extinct. She leaned forward slightly, keeping her movement slow and non-threatening. For the first 100 years, we just tried to survive. We grew food underground using artificial lights. We cleaned water and recycled air. Slowly, we started to communicate with other survivor groups. We shared resources and knowledge. After about 200 years, the radiation levels dropped enough that we could start living on the surface again. And rebuilding, one of the other officials said. This was a tall being covered in blue feathers. You're saying humans rebuilt their entire civilization? Kate nodded. It wasn't easy. We had to relearn a lot of things. Many records were destroyed in the war. But yes, we rebuilt. New cities, new technology, new ways of thinking. We learned from our mistakes. We created a single planetary government instead of hundreds of competing nations. We banned nuclear weapons completely. We decided that if we ever got a second chance, we wouldn't waste it. Officer Bruthen spoke up, his stone-like face impossible to read. The old records say that human military forces destroyed 32 galactic scout ships before your supposed extinction. Those scouts had better weapons and better technology. How did primitive humans win those battles? Kate's expression became sad. Those weren't battles, officer. Those were misunderstandings that turned deadly. The galactic scouts arrived during the worst period of our history. Humans were paranoid and terrified. We thought the scout ships might be enemies from surviving human factions. We attacked out of fear. It's one of our greatest shames. Fear made you capable of destroying ships with superior technology? Kelthus's voice carried disbelief. Fear makes any predator dangerous, Kate replied. But we're not those humans anymore. The people who fired on those scout ships were desperate survivors who thought they were protecting their families. We've spent 3 centuries learning to be better. That's why Earth waited so long before contacting the galactic community again. We wanted to be sure we were ready. We wanted to be sure we wouldn't make the same mistakes. Dean Zephyrus's colors shifted slightly, becoming more yellow. Kate's orientation material said yellow meant the Dean was thinking carefully. You said the Galactic Council approved an exchange program? Yes, 6 months ago. Earth sent a diplomatic mission to the Council. We shared our history honestly, including all the terrible parts. We didn't hide what we did or what we're capable of. The Council investigated carefully. They sent observers to Earth. They interviewed our leaders and citizens. After 5 months of evaluation, they approved a limited exchange program. 10 human students were selected to attend various universities across the galaxy. And they sent you here without warning us? The feathered official sounded angry. Kate shook her head. No. Earth's diplomatic corps sent all the proper notifications through official channels. My enrollment was processed months ago. I have all my acceptance documents and student identification. I assumed the university administration would inform the faculty and students before I arrived. There was an awkward silence. Dean Zephyrus's colors flickered through several shades. Finally, the dean spoke. There may have been a communication error. With thousands of students enrolling each term from hundreds of worlds, sometimes information doesn't reach everyone it should. So nobody knew a human was coming? Kelthus asked. Apparently not, the dean admitted. Kate felt a small sense of relief. At least this wasn't intentional. The university hadn't deliberately hidden her presence to see what would happen. It was just a mistake, an unfortunate oversight. Though the result was the same, terrified students and teachers who thought they were seeing a ghost. What happens now? Kate asked. Am I being expelled? Dean Zephyrus was quiet for a moment. The colors shifted again, moving through orange, yellow, and finally settling on a pale green. That's being discussed. Some members of the faculty want you removed immediately. They believe having a human on campus is too dangerous. They cite the historical records about human unpredictability and violence. Kate felt her stomach twist into a knot. She had come so far, traveled across space, left her family and her world behind. The idea of being sent home before even finishing 1 day of classes was crushing. However, the dean continued, others argue that you passed all the same entrance requirements as any other student. Your academic records from Earth are excellent. Your psychological evaluation showed no signs of instability or aggressive tendencies, and you've broken no rules. You simply revealed information that we should have already known. What's your opinion, Dean? Kate asked quietly. The crystalline being seemed to consider the question carefully. I believe in the mission of this university. We exist to share knowledge across species and cultures. We prepare students to work in a diverse galaxy, where they'll encounter beings very different from themselves. If humans are truly returning to the galactic community, then we need to understand you. And you need to understand us. Hope flickered in Kate's chest. Therefore, Dean Zephyrus said, I'm going to allow you to continue your studies. However, there will be conditions. What conditions? Kate asked. First, you'll be moved to a monitored dormitory. Not because we think you'll do something wrong, but because other students need reassurance. Second, you'll have regular meetings with our security office. Again, for everyone's peace of mind. Third, and most important, you'll participate in cultural exchange seminars. You'll give presentations about human culture and history. You'll answer questions. You'll help the university community understand what humans really are, beyond the frightening stories in old databases. Kate nodded slowly. I can do all of that. Thank you, Dean. Don't thank me yet, Zephyrus replied. The dean's colors flickered with something that might have been concern. The next few months won't be easy. Many students and faculty members are genuinely frightened. Some will avoid you. Others might be hostile. You'll need to be patient and understanding even when others aren't being understanding toward you. I know, Kate said. I'm ready for that. Officer Bruthen stepped forward. I'll escort you to your new dormitory. Your belongings have already been moved. As Kate stood to leave, Professor Kelthus spoke one more time. Miss Morrison, for what it's worth, I apologize. My lecture was based on incomplete information. If you're willing, I would like to interview you for my research. I want to correct the record about your species. Kate managed a small smile. I'd like that, Professor. Thank you. Walking through the university corridors with a security escort felt strange. Other students saw her coming and quickly moved away. Some pressed themselves against walls. Others ran in the opposite direction. Kate kept her head up and her expression calm, but inside she felt very alone. This was going to be much harder than she had imagined. Kate's new dormitory room was small but functional. It had a bed that was almost the right size for a human, a desk with a computer terminal, and a window that looked out over the university gardens. The gardens were beautiful, filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. Purple trees grew next to orange grass, flowers that glowed in the dark mixed with vines that seemed to move on their own. But Kate barely noticed the view. She sat on her bed feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. It was only her first day and already everything felt wrong. She had spent years preparing for this opportunity. She had studied the Galactic Common Language until she could speak it perfectly. She had learned about different alien cultures and customs. She had trained physically to make sure she could handle the different gravity and atmosphere of this station. What she hadn't prepared for was the fear. The way everyone looked at her like she was a monster. The way students ran away when she came near. The whispers and the stares and the obvious terror in so many eyes. Kate pulled out her communication device and recorded a message to send home to Earth. Because of the vast distance, real-time communication was impossible. Messages took weeks to travel between Earth and the university. But she needed to tell her family what was happening. "Hi, Mom, Dad, and Jack," she said to the camera. "I arrived safely at the university. The station is amazing, bigger than anything I imagined. You can see 3 different suns from the observation decks. But there's been a complication." She explained what had happened in the lecture hall about Professor Kelthus and his lecture on extinct species. She told them about the panic and the emergency meeting with the dean. She tried to keep her voice steady, but near the end it cracked slightly. "I'm okay," she finished. "The dean is letting me stay and continue my studies. But it's going to be difficult. Everyone is scared of me. I knew humans had a bad reputation, but seeing it in person is different from reading about it in reports. I'll send another message soon. I love you all." She sent the message and then sat in silence for a while. Finally, there was a knock on her door. Kate opened it to find a small robot hovering in the hallway. It was carrying a tray of food. "Student meal delivery," the robot said in a cheerful electronic voice. "One standard dinner based on your species' dietary requirements." Kate took the tray. At least the university had information about what humans could eat. The meal looked strange, made from alien plants and proteins, but it smelled okay. She thanked the robot and ate alone in her room. The next morning, Kate went to her first class. It was Introduction to Xenobiology, the study of different alien life forms. She had been looking forward to this class for months. The classroom was large, with seats arranged in a circle around a central display area. When Kate entered, several students who were already seated immediately got up and moved to seats on the opposite side of the room. The professor was a floating jellyfish-like creature that spoke through a translation device. When the professor saw Kate, there was a long pause. Then the professor continued with attendance as if nothing had happened. But Kate noticed that the professor stayed on the far side of the room, never coming within 10 feet of where Kate was sitting. During the lecture, the professor talked about basic biological categories and how to classify different types of life. It was interesting material, and Kate took careful notes on her electronic pad. But when the professor asked if anyone had questions, Kate raised her hand and the professor pretended not to see her. 3 other students asked questions and got detailed answers. Kate's hand stayed up, but she was never called on. After class, Kate approached the professor. "Excuse me, I had a question about the classification system you mentioned." The jellyfish creature floated backward quickly. "Office hours are posted on the class schedule. You can submit questions electronically." "But I'm right here," Kate said. "It will only take a moment." "Electronic submission only," the professor repeated, then floated away quickly, moving through the classroom door and disappearing down the hallway. Kate stood there alone, feeling frustrated and hurt. She understood that people were afraid, but this was supposed to be a university. These were scientists and educators. Shouldn't they be curious rather than just scared? Her next class was Galactic History. This professor was more professional, at least acknowledging Kate's presence with a brief nod. But when it came time to assign partners for a project, Kate was the only student left without a partner. The professor solved this by making Kate's assignment an individual project instead of a partnered one. Lunch was the worst part of the day. The cafeteria was enormous, serving hundreds of students from dozens of species. There were sections with different atmospheric conditions, areas with different gravity levels, and tables designed for every possible body type. Kate got her food, a mixture of items that the computer said were safe for human consumption, and looked for a place to sit. Every table she approached suddenly became full. Students would see her coming and quickly call over friends to fill empty seats, or they would suddenly remember they needed to be somewhere else and leave entirely. After 10 minutes of trying, Kate finally sat down at a completely empty table in the corner. She ate her meal alone, very aware that there was a circle of empty tables around her. It was like she had an invisible force field that pushed everyone away. Students at nearby tables kept glancing over at her, then quickly looking away when she noticed. Halfway through her meal, a gelatinous blob-like creature entered the cafeteria. Kate recognized it from her xenobiology class. The creature was called a Phloxian, a species that had no bones or solid structure. It moved by flowing across the ground like thick liquid. This particular Phloxian was named Gleep, according to the class roster Kate had memorized. Gleep got food and then started looking for a seat. The cafeteria was crowded now and most tables were full. Gleep oozed toward Kate's area, then seemed to notice her. The Phloxian stopped moving for a moment as if considering what to do. Kate expected Gleep to turn around and leave like everyone else had. But instead, after a long pause, Gleep continued forward and settled at the far end of Kate's table, as far from her as possible while still sharing the same table. It wasn't much, but it was something. Kate didn't try to start a conversation. She just continued eating, grateful not to be completely alone. After lunch, Kate had a laboratory session for her xenobiology class. Students were supposed to work in pairs, examining cell samples from different species under microscopes. When the professor announced partnerships, Kate was paired with Gleep. The Phloxian made a sound that the translator rendered as a nervous gulp. Gleep slowly oozed over to the laboratory station where Kate was waiting. They stood at opposite ends of the workbench, the microscope and sample containers between them. "Hello," Kate said quietly. "I'm Kate." "I know," Gleep replied. The Phloxian's voice through the translator sounded worried. "Everyone knows. You're the human." "Yes, I am, but I'm also just a student trying to learn xenobiology. Same as you." Gleep didn't respond. They started working on the assignment in silence. The task required preparing samples on slides and then viewing them under magnification. Kate noticed that Gleep was struggling with the slide preparation. Phloxian anatomy being liquid made it hard to manipulate small solid objects. "Would you like help with that?" Kate offered. Gleep pulled back slightly. "You want to help me? We're lab partners." "That's what partners do, right?" After a moment of hesitation, Gleep agreed. Kate carefully prepared the slides, her human hands with their opposable thumbs making the task easy. She explained what she was doing as she worked, so Gleep could learn the technique. Then they took turns viewing the samples under the microscope and recording observations. By the end of the lab session, Gleep seemed slightly less terrified. They still maintained maximum distance from Kate, but at least they were talking about the assignment and asking questions about the samples they were studying. "You're not what I expected," Gleep said as they cleaned up their workstation. "What did you expect?" Kate asked. "Something more scary. The stories say humans are aggressive hunters who never stop chasing their prey." Kate smiled sadly. "Those stories are based on worst-case scenarios. Yes, humans can be dangerous, but we're also scientists and artists and parents and friends. We're complicated like any species." Gleep didn't seem entirely convinced, but the Phloxian nodded slowly. "I suppose I'll learn more as we continue being lab partners." "I hope so," Kate said. As she walked back to her dormitory that evening, Kate felt slightly better than she had that morning. It was a small victory. Working with one lab partner who was only moderately terrified instead of completely terrified. But it was progress. She passed Officer Bruthen in the hallway. The large security officer nodded at her. "How was your first full day of classes, Miss Morrison?" "It was okay," Kate said. "Difficult, but okay." "Give it time," Bruthen said. His voice was surprisingly gentle for such a large, intimidating creature. Fear fades when people realize you're not going to eat them. Kate laughed despite herself. I'll try not to eat anyone. Appreciated, Bruthen said with what might have been humor. Back in her room, Kate did her homework and prepared for the next day's classes. Before going to sleep, 3 weeks passed slowly. Kate settled into a routine, though it was a lonely one. She went to classes where professors taught her while maintaining careful distance. She ate meals at her empty table in the cafeteria corner. She completed assignments and studied late into the night. Her grades were excellent, but she had no friends except for Gleep, who was gradually becoming less afraid of her. The Floxian lab partner had started sitting only 1 seat away in the cafeteria, instead of at the opposite end of the table. It was small progress, but it meant everything to Kate. They talked about class assignments and complained about difficult homework. Gleep even made jokes sometimes, though the translator made it hard to tell when the Floxian was being funny. Professor Kelthis kept his promise and invited Kate to his office for an interview. The office was filled with displays and models of various extinct creatures. Kate sat in a chair while the professor recorded their conversation. Tell me about Earth's recovery, Kelthis asked. The details that aren't in the official reports. Kate thought about how to explain. The first 50 years were the hardest. People lived underground or in sealed bunkers. Food was scarce. Many died from radiation sickness or starvation or simple accidents. The survivors had to make impossible choices about who got resources and who didn't. How did your species handle that psychologically? Kelthis's 4 eyes watched her carefully. Not well at first. There was depression, anger, and guilt. But humans are social creatures. We need each other. Slowly, the survivor group started working together instead of competing. They shared food, medicine, and knowledge. They realized that cooperation was the only way any of them would survive. Kate continued, describing how humans had slowly reclaimed their world. They cleaned the soil and water. They rebuilt cities using new technology designed to be sustainable. They created a single world government to prevent the kind of conflicts that had nearly destroyed them. We're not perfect, Kate admitted. We still have problems and disagreements. But we learned that we're better together than divided. It took nearly destroying ourselves to figure that out. Kelthis made notes on his electronic pad. This will be valuable for my research. The galactic community needs accurate information about humans if your species is rejoining interstellar society. Are we rejoining? Kate asked. Or are we starting fresh? Perhaps both, the professor said thoughtfully. Later that week, Kate had her regular check-in meeting with Officer Bruthen. They met in a security office that overlooked one of the university's main plazas. Through the window, Kate could see hundreds of students moving between classes. No incidents to report, Bruthen said, reviewing his notes. You've attended all your classes, completed all assignments, and caused no disturbances. Several professors have commented that you're an excellent student. That's good to hear, Kate said. She hesitated, then asked, Have you heard any feedback from other students? About me, I mean. Bruthen's stone-like face was impossible to read, but his voice was kind. The fear is decreasing, slowly. Some students are becoming curious instead of just scared. They watch you in the cafeteria and in classes. They're starting to see that you're not going to suddenly attack someone. I would never attack anyone, Kate said. I know that. But they don't, not yet. Fear isn't logical, Miss Morrison. It's emotional. It takes time for emotions to change, even with evidence. Kate nodded. She understood, even if it was frustrating. The breakthrough came during a chemistry class 2 days later. The class was working on a complex experiment involving dangerous chemical reactions. Students worked in groups of 3, carefully mixing compounds under controlled conditions. Kate was working alone as usual, since no one wanted to be her lab partner except Gleep, who wasn't in this class. At the station next to Kate's, 3 students were struggling with their experiment. One was an insect-like creature with multiple arms. Another was covered in scales and had a long tail. The third was a small furry being that reminded Kate of a cat, though she knew it was actually a species called Vixoni. The insect student was trying to pour a precise amount of liquid into a container, but their hands were shaking and the measurement was wrong. Kate could see they were about to add too much of a chemical that would cause a dangerous reaction. Wait, Kate called out. That's too much. You need exactly 50 milliliters, not 60. The insect student jumped, startled by Kate's voice. The container slipped and fell. The chemical spilled across the workbench, mixing with another substance that was already there. Immediately, smoke started rising from the mixture. A sharp burning smell filled the air. "Everyone step back," the chemistry professor shouted. "That's a toxic reaction. Don't breathe the fumes." But the 3 students at that station were frozen in panic. They stood there, breathing in the dangerous smoke, not moving. Without thinking, Kate ran to their station. She grabbed the small, furry Vixoni student and pulled them away from the smoke. Then she reached for the scaled student, dragging them back from the toxic fumes. The insect student was larger and harder to move. Kate grabbed them and pulled as hard as she could, getting them away from the dangerous area. By this time, the ventilation system had kicked in, sucking the toxic smoke out of the room. Emergency alarms were ringing. Kate realized she had breathed in some of the fumes while rescuing the students. Her throat burned and she felt dizzy. But the 3 students she had pulled away were safe, coughing but alive. The professor rushed over with medical equipment. "Is anyone seriously hurt?" "I don't think so," Kate said, her voice rough from the chemical exposure. "But they should all be checked." They were standing right over the reaction. Medical robots arrived within minutes and scanned all 4 students. The 3 Kate had rescued had minor exposure but would be fine. Kate had inhaled more of the toxic fumes than any of them because she had spent longer in the contaminated area, pulling each student to safety. "You need to go to the medical center," one of the robots said to Kate. "Your lung function is showing signs of chemical damage." "I'm okay," Kate said, but she was coughing now and having trouble breathing. The Vixoni student she had rescued, a female named Pepper, stepped forward. "You saved us. You ran toward danger to help us." "Anyone would have done the same," Kate said between coughs. "No," the scaled student said. "Everyone else ran away from the smoke. You ran toward it." The insect student, whose name was Zix, touched Kate's arm gently with one of their many hands. It was the first time any student had voluntarily touched her. "Thank you. You could have been seriously hurt." Kate managed a small smile. "But you're safe. That's what matters." The medical robots insisted on taking Kate to the medical center. As she left the classroom, she saw that other students were watching her with different expressions now. Not fear, but something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or possibly respect. At the medical center, doctors treated Kate's chemical exposure. Her lungs had some irritation, but nothing permanent. They kept her overnight for observation. Gleep visited her that evening, bringing homework assignments Kate had missed. "The whole university is talking about what you did," Gleep said, settling into a chair that was designed for the Floxian's liquid form. "The video from the classroom security camera has been shared thousands of times." "Video?" Kate asked. "All classrooms have security cameras. The footage shows you running toward the chemical spill while everyone else ran away. It shows you pulling 3 students to safety even though you were breathing toxic fumes." Kate felt embarrassed. "I just did what needed to be done." "That's exactly what has everyone talking," Gleep explained. "The old records say humans are dangerous. But the video shows you being dangerous in a helpful way. You used your speed and strength to save others, not to hurt them." The next morning, when Kate was released from the medical center, something had changed. As she walked across campus toward her dormitory, students didn't run away. They didn't press themselves against walls to avoid her. Some even nodded at her or made gestures of greeting in their various species customs. In the cafeteria at lunch, Pepper the Vixoni approached Kate's usual empty table. "May I sit here?" "Of course," Kate said, surprised and pleased. Pepper sat down, followed by Zix the insect student. Then Gleep oozed over, settling comfortably nearby. For the first time since arriving at the university, Kate ate lunch with other students around her. They talked about classes and homework and complained about difficult professors. It wasn't friendship yet, not exactly. But it was the beginning of something. The other students were cautious but curious. They asked Kate questions about Earth and human culture. They wanted to know what humans ate and how they lived and what they did for fun. Kate answered everything honestly. She told them about music and movies and sports. She explained that humans like to tell stories and make art. She described her family back on Earth and how much she missed them. "You have a family?" Pepper asked. "Parents and siblings?" "Of course," Kate said. "Doesn't everyone?" "Well, yes," Pepper replied. "But the stories made it sound like humans were just warriors and hunters, not people with families who miss them." "We're people," Kate said simply. Just like you. We have hopes and fears and dreams. We love our families and worry about tests and argue about silly things. 2 months had passed since Kate's first day at the university. The change was remarkable. She now ate lunch with a regular group that included Gleep, Pepper, Zix, and several other students who had gradually joined their table. She had study groups for her classes. Professors called on her when she raised her hand. She was becoming part of the university community, not just an outsider that everyone feared. Dean Zypheros had asked Kate to give a presentation about human culture and history. It was part of the cultural exchange program the dean had mentioned during their first meeting. Kate spent weeks preparing, wanting to get everything right. She created visual displays showing Earth's recovery, explained human customs and traditions, and prepared answers to questions she thought students might ask. The presentation was scheduled in one of the university's largest auditoriums. Kate expected maybe 50 students to attend. When she arrived, the auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled and students stood along the walls and sat in the aisles. There had to be at least 500 beings there, representing dozens of different species. Kate felt nervous standing on the stage looking out at the massive crowd. But she took a deep breath and began. She showed images of Earth before the war, beautiful cities and natural wonders. Then she showed the devastation after the nuclear exchange, the ruined buildings and empty landscapes. Finally, she showed the rebuilding. The new cities rising from the ashes, the forests growing again, the oceans becoming clean. This is who humans are, Kate said, her voice steady despite her nerves. We make terrible mistakes. We nearly destroyed ourselves. But we also have the strength to rebuild, the wisdom to learn from our errors, and the hope to believe in a better future. She talked about human culture, about art and music and literature. She played recordings of human music, everything from classical symphonies to rock and roll. She showed paintings and sculptures created by human artists. She read poetry and excerpts from famous books. Humans are creative, Kate explained. We use art to express emotions and ideas. We tell stories to teach lessons and preserve history. We make music because it brings us joy and helps us cope with sadness. Then she opened the floor to questions. Hands, tentacles, and various other appendages shot up across the auditorium. Kate pointed to a student in the front row, a being covered in purple fur. The old records say humans are persistence hunters who chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Is that true? Kate nodded. Yes, that's true. Ancient humans hunted that way because we could run for hours in the heat without stopping. Most animals can run faster than humans, but they overheat quickly. Humans can just keep going. It's called persistence hunting, and it was very effective. That sounds terrifying, the purple-furred student said. Maybe, Kate agreed. But modern humans don't hunt that way anymore. We have farms and grocery stores. The same traits that made us good hunters also make us good at other things. Marathon runners use that endurance. Rescue workers use it when searching for survivors after disasters. Traits aren't good or bad by themselves. It's how we use them that matters. Another question came from a crystalline student. Why do humans form attachments to creatures from other species? The records say you adopt animals as pets and treat them like family members. Kate smiled. Because we're social creatures who need companionship. On Earth, we domesticated animals thousands of years ago. Dogs, cats, horses, and many others became our partners and friends. We bred them to live with us, and they changed us too. Having animals in our lives makes us happier and healthier. We love them because they love us back in their own way. But that's illogical, the crystalline student protested. They're not even the same species. They can't hold conversations or share complex ideas. Love isn't always logical, Kate replied. It's emotional, and emotions don't care about species boundaries. We bond with creatures that share our lives and depend on us. It's one of the things that makes us human. A large insectoid student asked, The records say humans will sacrifice themselves to save strangers. Why would anyone do that? Kate thought carefully about her answer. Because we believe that every life has value. When we see someone in danger, we feel compelled to help. Yes, sometimes humans die trying to save others, but we also believe that a life spent helping others is a life well lived. We'd rather die trying to save someone than live knowing we could have helped but didn't. That seems inefficient, the insectoid said, from a survival perspective. Maybe, Kate acknowledged. But efficiency isn't everything. We're not robots programmed only for survival. We're emotional beings who care about things beyond ourselves. That's part of what makes life worth living. The questions continued for over an hour. Students asked about everything from human family structures to how Earth's government worked. They wanted to know about human holidays and celebrations, about sports and games, about education and careers. Kate answered every question as honestly as she could, never trying to make humans seem perfect or hide their flaws. Near the end, Professor Kelthis stood up. "Miss Morrison, you've mentioned several times that humans learn from their mistakes. But the nuclear war wasn't a small mistake. It nearly ended your species. How can we trust that humans won't make similar mistakes in the future?" It was a hard question, and Kate knew the entire auditorium was waiting for her answer. "Professor, I can't promise that humans will never make mistakes. No one can make that promise about any species. We're imperfect beings living in a complicated galaxy. But I can tell you what we've learned." She pulled up a new display, showing Earth's current government structure and laws. "We learned that division leads to conflict. That's why we created a single planetary government instead of competing nations. We learned that weapons of mass destruction are too dangerous to exist. That's why we banned them completely and destroyed our remaining nuclear stockpiles. We learned that we need to think about the long-term future, not just immediate gains. That's why we spent a century preparing before contacting the galactic community again." Kate paused, looking out at the audience. "Most importantly, we learned that we're not alone in the universe. We're just one species among many. We don't have the right to dominate others or impose our will. We want to be part of the galactic community, contributing and learning alongside everyone else. That's why I'm here. I'm not trying to prove that humans are perfect. I'm just trying to show that we're worth giving a chance." The auditorium was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, students began making gestures of approval in their various cultural traditions. Some clapped, others clicked or whistled, and a few flashed colors. It wasn't universal approval. Kate could see some skeptical faces in the crowd, but it was acceptance. At least partial acceptance, and that was more than she had dared hope for. After the presentation, many students came up to talk with Kate. They thanked her for being honest and open. Some apologized for avoiding her when she first arrived. Others invited her to join various study groups and social activities. Pepper, who had been sitting in the front row, approached with several friends. "We're going to the recreation center tomorrow evening. Some of us play a game kind of like what you called basketball. Would you like to come?" Kate felt warmth spread through her chest. A social invitation, not related to class or academics, just friends asking her to hang out. "I'd love to come." "Great," Pepper said, her furry face showing what Kate had learned was a Vixoni smile. "Fair warning though, Zix is really competitive and gets upset when losing." "I heard that," Zix called out from nearby, clicking their mandibles in what passed for laughter. That night, Kate sat at her desk and composed another message home. "Hi everyone. Today was a good day. Maybe the best day since I arrived here. I gave a big presentation and people actually listened. They asked questions and seemed genuinely interested in learning about humanity. I'm making real friends now, not just people who tolerate me. Tomorrow I'm playing sports with them. Actual sports, just for fun. Mom, you were right. You told me it would get better if I was patient and kind. You were right. I love you all so much." She sent the message and then prepared for bed. Tomorrow she had classes, studying, and then basketball with friends. It was starting to feel like a normal university experience, the kind she had dreamed about back on Earth. As Kate lay in bed waiting for sleep, she thought about how far she had come. 2 months ago, students had run from her in terror. Now they invited her to social activities. She had gone from being a scary monster to being just Kate, a student who happened to be human. There was still prejudice and fear. Some students still avoided her. Some professors still maintained their distance. But the tide was turning. More people were willing to look past the scary stories and see the person underneath. Kate drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of pickup basketball games and study sessions with friends. She dreamed of a future where humans were fully accepted members of the galactic community, contributing their unique perspectives and strengths alongside every other species. It was a good dream, and slowly, day by day, it was becoming reality. The next few weeks passed in a blur of classes, homework, and social activities. Kate joined several clubs and study groups. She helped others. The semester continued, and Kate threw herself into her new role as cultural liaison while keeping up with her regular studies. She created orientation materials for the incoming human students, explaining what to expect and how to handle the initial fear and suspicion they would face. She worked with Dean Zyferos to establish better procedures, so future human students wouldn't have the shocking introduction that she had experienced. But Kate's quiet progress was about to face its biggest test. It started on a normal Tuesday morning. Kate was in her advanced physics class when the building's alarm system activated. The professor stopped mid-lecture as emergency messages flashed across every display screen in the room. Attention all students and faculty. There is a critical emergency in the engineering research building. A reactor containment failure has occurred. All personnel must evacuate the area immediately. Students began gathering their belongings and moving toward the exits in an orderly fashion. The university had excellent safety procedures, and everyone knew what to do during emergencies. Kate followed along with the others, exiting the physics building and heading toward the designated safe assembly area. But as they walked across campus, Kate could see smoke rising from the engineering building. Emergency vehicles were racing toward the scene, their lights flashing. Something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just a drill or a minor malfunction. When they reached the assembly area, Kate found Gleep and Pepper in the crowd. Other students were checking their communication devices for updates. The news was spreading quickly through social networks. 3 students are trapped inside, Pepper said, reading from her device. The automatic containment doors sealed them in when the reactor started failing. The radiation levels are too high for rescue teams to reach them. Kate felt her stomach clench. 3 students trapped with radiation levels rising. She pushed through the crowd, trying to get closer to the emergency command center that had been set up near the engineering building. Security was keeping everyone back, but Kate could see Dean Zyferos and other officials huddled together, looking at displays and having urgent conversations. Officer Bruthen was part of the security cordon. Kate approached him. "Bruthen, what's the situation? Can they reach the trapped students?" The large officer shook his head. "The radiation levels are too high. Our emergency suits can't handle that much exposure for long enough to reach the inner lab where the students are trapped. The engineering team is trying to shut down the reactor remotely, but it's not responding to commands." "How much time do the students have?" Kate asked. "Maybe 30 minutes before the radiation exposure becomes lethal for most species. We're trying to get specialized equipment, but it won't arrive in time." Kate's mind was racing. She remembered her orientation materials about the university, information about radiation safety and exposure limits for different species. She thought about human biology and the adaptations that 3 centuries of living in a radioactive environment had created. "Bruthen, what are the current radiation levels in the inner lab?" The officer checked his display. "Approximately 600 rads and climbing. Why?" "Because humans can survive that," Kate said. "At least for a short time. Our radiation tolerance is much higher than most species. After the nuclear war, the humans who survived were the ones with the best radiation resistance. That trait has been selected for over 300 years. Bruthen's stone-like face turned toward her. "You're saying you could survive going in there?" "I'm saying I have a better chance than anyone else here. Let me see the floor plan. If I move fast, I can reach them and guide them out before the radiation does permanent damage." "This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior the old records warned about," Bruthen said, but his voice wasn't harsh. It sounded concerned, almost worried. "It's not reckless if I'm the only option," Kate replied. 3 people are going to die if we do nothing. I can help them, please." Bruthen was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke into his communication device. "Dean Zyferos, we may have an option. The human student wants to attempt a rescue." A minute later, Kate was standing in front of the dean and the emergency coordinator, explaining her plan. Dean Zyferos's colors were flashing through anxious patterns. "This is an enormous risk, Miss Morrison. You could die." "I could," Kate agreed. "But those 3 students will definitely die if we wait. I've done the calculations. If I move quickly and don't waste time, I can get in and out with survivable radiation exposure. It won't be pleasant, but I'll recover." The emergency coordinator, a Vexorian with practical experience in crisis management, looked at Kate with all 4 eyes. "You've done the calculations?" "Yes. Human radiation tolerance is approximately 4 times higher than the galactic average. I can handle 600 rads for the time it will take to reach the students and guide them out. I'll absorb a dangerous dose, but not a lethal one." "But they're not human," the coordinator pointed out. "The trapped students can't handle the radiation levels you can, which is why we need to get them out now while they're still mobile," Kate said. "Every minute we wait, they get weaker. If we wait for the specialized equipment, they'll be unconscious or dead. Dean Zypheros looked at the emergency coordinator, who looked at Officer Bruthen, who looked back at Kate. She could see them weighing options, calculating risks, trying to find another way. But there wasn't another way, and they all knew it. "Get her a radiation suit," Dean Zypheros finally said, "and monitor her every step. Morrison, you have authorization, but we're tracking you constantly. If your readings get too dangerous, you abort the mission immediately." "Understood," Kate said. The next few minutes were a blur. Emergency technicians fitted Kate with a radiation suit that was designed for brief exposure during equipment repairs. It wasn't meant for rescue operations, but it would provide some protection. They gave her a communication device so she could stay in contact with the command center. They showed her the fastest route to the inner lab on a display. Kate memorized the path and checked her suit one final time. Through the face shield, she could see a crowd of students watching from the safe zone. Cleep was there, along with Pepper and Zix and many others she had come to know. They looked worried and frightened, but they were watching her with something else too. Trust, maybe, or hope. "Ready?" Bruthen asked. Kate took a deep breath. "Ready." She entered the contaminated zone through an emergency airlock. Immediately, alarms started sounding. Her suit's radiation detector was beeping constantly, warning her about the dangerous environment. Kate ignored it and moved forward, following the route she had memorized. The corridors were empty and filled with an eerie red light from the emergency systems. Smoke drifted through the air. Kate could hear the distant sound of the failing reactor, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. She moved as quickly as she could while still being careful not to trip or make mistakes. "First corridor clear," she reported into her communication device, approaching the second section. "Copy that," came the response from the command center. "Your radiation exposure is within acceptable limits so far. Keep moving." Kate entered the second corridor and immediately saw that part of the ceiling had collapsed. Debris blocked the normal path. She had to climb over twisted metal and broken equipment, wasting precious seconds. Her suit tore slightly on a sharp edge, and she felt a moment of panic before realizing the tear was small and the suit was still mostly functional. "Slight delay," she reported. "There's debris, but I'm getting through." "Understood. The trapped students are getting weaker. They need you to hurry." Kate pushed herself harder, climbing over the obstacles and continuing forward. She reached the third corridor, which led directly to the inner lab. The radiation levels here were much higher. Her suit alarms were screaming now, and she could feel the heat even through the protective layers. Finally, she reached the sealed door of the inner lab. It was locked by the automatic safety systems. Kate pulled out the emergency override device they had given her and plugged it into the door's control panel. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the door hissed and slid open. Inside, 3 students were huddled together on the floor. Kate recognized them from around campus. 2 were Floxians, their gelatinous bodies looking wilted and weak. The third was a Xanthorian, a species with tentacles and multiple sensory organs. All 3 looked up when Kate entered, their expressions showing disbelief. "Human?" The Xanthorian gasped weakly. "You came for us?" "Of course I came," Kate said, moving to help the first Floxian. "Can you move? We need to get out of here now." The Floxians could barely maintain their shapes. The radiation was breaking down their cellular structure. Kate helped one of them move toward the door, supporting their weight as much as possible. The Xanthorian tried to stand but collapsed. "I can't," the Xanthorian said. "Too weak." Kate made a quick decision. Floxians were large but not heavy, mostly liquid. She could carry them if necessary. "Okay, everyone stay close to me. We're moving together." She guided the first Floxian through the door, then went back for the second one. The Xanthorian was trying to crawl, using their tentacles to pull themselves forward. Kate grabbed the Xanthorian and lifted them as much as she could, half carrying and half